Welcome to the Legacy Warriors podcast, where we cover the top two feeder leagues to the UFC, and that's either the Cage Warriors promotions across the pond or the LFA, which we'll be covering this week with LFA 210 going down Friday night with, I believe, in Kentucky, with the headliner between Lance Lawrence going up against Javier Reyes. And we got some fun prospects on this card as well. So fun card to have studied and gone through. And now here I am to break it down in video form for you guys. It's already dropped as a full card breakdown in written form on the Lock of the Night Patreon page, which is also where I've dropped all my bets for the card. And I believe I have 6 or 7, if I remember off the top of my head. You can either try to decipher it by watching this video and seeing which fighters that I like and which spots I'm starting to highlight, or you can just go right to the Patreon page and get these plays, and hopefully we can cash some tickets as a appetizer for tomorrow's events, where we got KSW and OKTAGON going down in the morning. I won't have any video breakdowns for that, but I will have written breakdowns and track plays for that. You can find that on the MMA LOT and Patreon page, and then also you can find all the plays that I'll have for UFC Atlanta, which goes down Saturday night as well. All right, I believe there's 13 fights for this LFA card, so I'm going to go over each one pretty briefly, give you guys my predictions, and get right up on out of here, all within hopefully 20 minutes or less. So let's get into it. First fight up, Dalton Goins, plus 500, going up against Angelo Robles, who comes in at minus 700. Goins is a very strong guy that likes to bully his opponents, but seems to really struggle in the technical side of things, and that's where opponents have often been able to either submit him, where he just seems to have no idea with submission defense, but he's also been knocked out in the past as well. He goes up against a very tough Angelo Robles, who is a very solid prospect, has a great grappling game, very good submission game as well, and I think it's not going to take him all that long to eventually find that submission here against Goins, and I wouldn't mind parlaying him anywhere up to that minus 700, minus 800 line here. So give me Robles to get the job done pretty quickly. Next up, we got Alexander Schenk coming in at plus 220, going up against Roland Pruden, who comes in at minus 280. Now, Schenk has a ton of experience between MMA, bare knuckle MMA, boxing, and he makes his LFA debut with a 6-4 pro record. This is a guy that seems to enjoy the striking realm, where he puts together solid combinations, but he doesn't seem to be all that dangerous in terms of fending off guys that want to take fights to the ground and try to grind them out that way or find submissions. And that's exactly what he's facing here with Pruden, who had an unfortunate debut with the LFA back in September as he took on a high-level collegiate wrestler Michael Block, who was able to keep him in bad positions and grind him out for 15 minutes. But Pruden is normally a guy that implements that type of style himself, looking to take opponents to the ground and be very aggressive with his submission approach that we often see. And I think he'll be able to do that successfully here against Schenk, and I think within 2 rounds he should be able to find a submission. And even if he doesn't, if this fight ends up hitting the scorecards, I think his wrestling will end up being the difference maker for him to win this fight pretty clearly. All right, next up, we got Steve Collins coming in at minus 750, going up against Gabriel Brown, who comes in at plus 550. Scuba Steve went up against another undefeated LFA prospect back at LFA 200. I believe it was Kelton Sneeve, if I remember correctly. And that was a fight that was back and forth, very close fight. He ended up getting the split decision win that night. Could have gone the other way, but we saw a full mixed martial arts display by both guys, grappling, striking, scrambling. It was very impressive to see, and that clearly makes sense why he is minus 750 here against Brown, who seems to be more so of a guy for others to get more experience against and get not an easy W, but okay, I'm going to say an easy W. You know, he is a guy that looks to take fights to the grappling realm and try to get to his heel hook. But just as we saw in his LFA debut against Jacoby Jones back in November, he's easily put away, and we saw Jones get that knockout within 2 minutes. I think it might take Collins a little bit longer to get the finish here, but once he shucks off most of the takedowns from Brown, I think we'll see Collins utilize his striking, speed, and power advantage to eventually get that knockout over Brown within 2 rounds. All right, this is the fight I think I am most excited about between Gabe Eurit, who comes in at minus 185, going up against Tanner Trembley, who comes in at plus 155. Now, Eurit had a clean 8-0 record as an amateur and now is 2-0 as a pro. He's finished all but 2 of his 10 total wins, and this guy is very athletic, very gifted, in very good shape, and has showcased a solid fight game all around. Solid striking, but his grappling seems to be where he is best, with his ability to just grind guys out, find finishes, like I said, but also his striking is a spot where he's gaining a lot of confidence and really dictating the pace of a lot of his fights by walking his opponents down. His opponent Trembley is now 2-0 in the LFA, 3-0 overall as a professional. Last time around, we saw him deliver a nasty knockout victory over Kyle Zimic in April, where he fended off an early guillotine attempt from Zimic, eventually got the fight back to the feet, and even though he was the one on his back foot the entire time, he eventually found those big shots to put Kyle Zimic away and get his hand raised by knockout. This is a fight where both guys will likely have a lot of success, and the finishing and threat ability of the threat and finishing ability of Trembley gives me some pause here in terms of trying to take that minus 185 chalk on Eurit. But at the end of the day, I think Eurit is the better fighter. Trembley can absolutely win this fight by landing a big shot of his own or finding a submission, but I think Eurit will be the one in control the entire time. I think he'll be the one pushing the pace. I think he'll stay clean in the striking realm, get this into the grappling realm where he could find some solid controlling success. But this will be a close fight. I wouldn't hate on anybody looking to take a little bit of nibble on Trembley to pull off the upset, but I'm going to go Eurit here as my prediction, and I think he ends up winning this fight on the scorecards. All right, next up we got Emilio Vallecillo coming in at minus 150, going up against Pedro Ley Jr., who comes in at plus 120. Now, Emilio, last time around, fought at LFA, but unfortunately did not have his fight shown. But from what I heard, it was a very gutsy performance. Had a lot of success striking and grappling and showcasing his BJJ brown belt. There was a long layoff between his amateur and pro career, nearly 10 years away from action, but now he's a 2-0 as a pro. I love that he, recognized and even stated that his first pro win was over a complete tomato can, but he had to dig a little bit deeper in his last matchup, and he was able to come out on top. His opponent, Pedro Ley Jr., is only 1-0, looks to be a little bit of a physical fighter, very big, very strong, but a lot of the technical aspects of his game are still a big question mark. He fought a tomato can in his lone MMA fight, but that tomato can was definitely a scrapper, a guy that was pushing Ley, causing Ley to start to slow down, but once Ley got that takedown, he was able to showcase his strength advantage, and he eventually hooked up the key lock to force the quick tap from his opponent that night. I think Emilio should be able to dictate the pace of this fight. I think he can grind Ley down up against the cage and eventually drag him to the ground. And I think from there, it's just a matter of time before Emilio is able to find a finish. I think he ends up finding that submission against Ley. Ley's kind of trained all over the place. The last time I checked, he's over there at American Top Team, but from everything that I've seen thus far, he still seems to have a lot of holes in the technical aspect of his game, and I think Emilio should be able to find those spots to drain Ley's gas tank and eventually find that finish probably in the second or third round. All right, next up, we got Tyler Forsythe coming in at plus 160, going up against Eric Calvert, who comes in at minus 200. This is a fight between two guys that normally like to take the grapple-heavy approach and look for quick submissions. Forsythe is a guy that trains at Law School MMA alongside Danny Barlow, and a guy that fights for PFL, Nathan Gilmore, who actually fights the day before Forsythe here. And Forsythe is 4-1 as a pro. He's finished all of his fights in the first round, and 3 of them by submission. He's very quick with taking the back of his opponents and looking for the submissions. Does a decent job of defending when he finds himself in those bad spots as well, even though he did get choked out by a triangle choke in his last and in his lone pro loss. The combined record of the opponents that he's defeated as a pro is 1-11. So that's definitely something to keep in mind here. Now, Calvert came up short in his LFA debut back in October, but he's also a guy that's very active with his jiu-jitsu game. Loves the triangle choke, does a great job in terms of setting it up, going between the armbar and the triangle choke. He often settles for the triangle choke because it's a lot safer and easier to cinch up rather than armbars, which are a little bit easier to get out of. I expect him to be very aggressive here against Forsythe. I think he'll be a little bit craftier in the submission game, and I think that he'll actually end up finding the submission here within a round and a half. Something to note, both these guys have a similar opponent in Dakota Smith. Smith was able to get a triangle choke against Forsythe, while Calvert was able to get the triangle choke against Smith. So I don't know if MMA math will work out here, but it feels like it probably will. So I'm going to go Calvert and Calvert by submission. All right, next up, we got Amir Khan Buchaev coming in at plus 200, going up against Cannon Swanson, who comes in at minus 260. Now, Buchaev is a guy that I was expecting to be blown away by with that 2-0 record, but after watching the fights, he leaves a lot to be desired. You know, he likes the flashy striking techniques. He has some decent grappling of his own, but he's been taken down. He's been grinded out. He's managed to pull off some reversals. He's been caught in some bad submission attempts, and I think that once he fights guys with legitimate resistance, we'll start to see some of the flaws in his game, and I think that's what we'll likely see this weekend when he goes up against Swanson, who seems to be one of LFA's prospects that they're really pushing. He was quickly knocked out by a power puncher back at LFA 200 in Curtis Ellis, who's a knockout or bust fighter, so nothing really to hammer Swanson about there, but he was able to get back in the win column earlier this year, after that loss, and get that confidence back. I expect Swanson to, I don't want to say run through Buchaev, but I think he can make this very hard for Buchaev early, and then within 7.5 minutes, I expect him to have Buchaev worn down, and from there he should be able to work for a finish where he's often been able to get most of his success. I like the under 2.5, which is roughly around even money from what I saw on Bodog, and I think it's just a matter of time before Swanson finds that spot to either submit Buchaev or posture up, get a ground and pound spot, and end up coming through as the minus 260 favorite. Speaking of finishes, we got Jackson McVey up next, coming in at minus 1,400, going up against Mateo Garner, who comes in at plus 800. Now, McVey looks like a fun prospect, a little bit of a bruiser, but most of his offense comes from the grappling realm, where he has a very nasty choke. He loves the guillotine, he loves the Bravo choke, just as he showed against a BJJ black belt last time around, but also the fact that he hasn't been all that busy as of late, and it's not really his fault. A lot of guys have been scheduled to fight against him even earlier this year, but a lot of his opponents have pulled out. So, we're 24 hours away from this fight actually taking place. Hopefully it actually ends up happening. But I'd like to see him go into deeper water. He's only had one of his 5 pro wins go past the 1 minute mark. He's just so good in terms of attacking the necks of his opponent and forcing the tap almost immediately. Like even in his last matchup, there was a little bit of a scramble situation, and McVey looked for the neck immediately and cinched up the Bravo choke and forced the tap from his opponent. Garner made his pro debut back in June of 2023 under the LFA lights, and now he is 4-1 in his pro career. His last win came against a guy in February who was 0-2, beat him on the scorecards. He looks very strong, very physical, likes to bully opponents with his strength, take them to the ground and try to get the better of them there. But he finds himself in trouble against guys that are better BJJ specialists who are often able to find him in those submissions and force the tap. He has some decent power in his hands, but he is susceptible to guys like McVey, who will have a large height advantage in this matchup. And I think it's just a matter of time before McVey ends up finding that neck of Garner and forces the tap out of him there. Minus 1,400 is not a line I really want to get behind here, but I fully expect McVey to find that submission within a round and a half, force the tap, and continue this flawless run that he's currently on. All right, next up, fun women's matchup here between Mackenzie Stiller, who comes in at plus 105, going up against Sydney Trillo, who comes in at minus 135. Now, starting off on the Stiller's side of things, she is no stranger to pulling off upsets, as the first fight of her career was against Benson Henderson's wife, who a lot of people thought was going to have a, somewhat of a successful MMA career, but we saw Stiller submit her in the first round. Then she went up against Chiara Penso, who had over 10 more fights than her as a pro, and we saw Stiller grind her out and win that fight. And then last time around, she was able to get her last win, she was able to get a submission victory. Unfortunately, she went up against a much more talented Samiko Inaba in a fight where Stiller had some success. She was able to lean on her judo background, land a few takedowns, even have a few close submission attempts. But in the second round, Inaba was able to get that physicality going, pushing Stiller up against the cage and really roughing her up with some nasty shots, nasty elbows. Stiller was still able to get some, decent spots. Got a judo throwdown, got the back of Inaba sunken in armbar, but Inaba was able to work out of it and eventually get the TKO finish shortly thereafter. Stiller is very physical. She's a judo black belt, if I'm not mistaken, and she gets a lot of her best work done when she's able to drag opponents to the ground and utilize her physicality. Sydney Trillo, on the other side, is on a 3-fight winning streak. She's a Muay Thai specialist and likes to really let go with combinations from distance. She likes to let go with some knees and elbows inside the clinch. Her lone pro loss came in May of 2022, where she ended up coming up short against Fatima Klein, which is not a bad loss to have on your record, knowing how good Klein actually is. And the fact that she even made it, I believe into the second or third round against Klein, very impressive there. But last time she went up against a bit of a scrub, and she went the full 15 minutes with her. There were moments where her opponent was able to push her up against the cage and have some success there, showcasing some of her own physicality. But then as the fight started to wear on, we saw Trillo start to take over, land more effective shots, and end up winning that fight on the scorecards. In this matchup, close fight, the grappling of Stiller against the Muay Thai of Trillo, and I have to lean with the physicality and grappling of Stiller, especially as the underdog here. I think she can get to her judo throws. I think she can get Trillo to the ground. I think she is the stronger of the two, and that's going to be key here with Stiller being able to keep Trillo up against the cage. And even though Trillo has a striking advantage, I don't think it's wide enough to cause Stiller a ton of trouble to what Inaba was able to do to Stiller last time around. So I'm going to go Stiller here. I wouldn't be surprised if she ended up getting a submission, considering how aggressive she normally is when she gets fights to the mat. But even if she just grinds this fight out, I think that's more than capable, or something that she's capable of doing here. And I'm willing to take the leap on her as the underdog to win this fight. All right, next up, we got Ilyas Mamadaliyev coming in at plus 160, going up against Lucas Faria, who comes in at minus 200. Now, on Mamadaliyev, I've heard a lot about the kid, and mainly because he's been quite vocal on social media, hoping to get that jump to the Contender Series or the UFC, but I don't really know if he's worthy of it or deserving of it. He had a 2-fight losing streak, and then he's managed to put together 2 straight wins in December and February over complete bums. 2 guys that combined for a record of 9-36, with one of them only having 1 win. Power puncher, decent grappler, nothing special overall. And that's why I think Faria at minus 200, it's kind of justifiable, but there are too many question marks on Faria in terms of the lack of activity he's had. He was fed to Jose Delgado back in July, and Delgado just absolutely destroyed him in 80 seconds. But Faria was coming back from a 5-year-long layoff that night. Now he's been training all over the place, setting up shop recently at American Top Team. He's a BJJ black belt, so I'm assuming he's going to be looking to get this fight to the ground against Mamadaliyev. But there are just too many question marks on Faria's ceiling, and especially now that he's not fighting a killer like Delgado, maybe we get to see what he actually looks like. So that's something to definitely consider here. But I'm going to go Faria. I can't take the plunge at minus 200. I'm hoping we see this fight at least hit the second or third round so we can get a little bit better of an idea of what we're getting with Faria. But I don't think Mamadaliyev is that good. He might win this fight. Maybe he stops the takedown of Faria and punishes him on the feet. But again, there's nothing special from the Mamadaliyev game that makes me want to take the jump on him as the underdog here. So I'm going to go Faria by submission. All right, next up, we got Jeremy Kennedy coming in. Jeremy Henry. We have Jeremy Kennedy fighting the day before for PFL, but I meant Jeremy Henry coming in at plus 190, going up against Dakota Hope, who comes in at minus 240. Now, starting off on the Henry side of things, this guy has been, streaking throughout his career. He's 13 pro fights since early 2023 when he turned to pro. His streaks have been a 3-fight winning streak, 2-fight losing streak, 4-fight winning streak, 3-fight losing streak, and now he's coming off of a big knockout victory over former UFC fighter Kama Worthy. He has some decent Muay Thai. He's obviously very aggressive in the grappling realm when he's able to get it there, but that seems to fall off after that first round or so, or after the first couple of submission attempts we normally see from him. Opponents have often been able to get him to the ground and get to dominant positions pretty quickly, and then they're able to get him out of there pretty quickly as well. The one notable thing on his record is that he has a win over former Dana White Contender Series competitor Alex Morgan in a fight where he seemed to come in and was seemingly being put in a position to do the job for Morgan, so Morgan can add another win to his record and maybe get back to the Contender Series. But Henry showed solid work, was able to hurt Morgan and eventually follow up with a submission to get the tap there. But he's going up against a very strong and physical Dakota Hope, who's one of the brighter prospects on the regional scene, who finally is getting this opportunity on the biggest regional show on North American soil with the LFA. He's 8-1, riding a 2-fight winning streak. And his only loss came in a fight which was a 5-round title fight. It seemed like he just blew his wad in the first 2 rounds trying to finish his opponent by just recklessly closing the pocket and trying to land big shots. And then his opponent was able to just chip away at him over the last 3 rounds to win that matchup. Looking at them after the fight completed, it looked like Hope had won because of the amount of damage that was clearly showing on his opponent's face. But round by round scoring, it was obvious that his opponent had done enough in the last 3 rounds to win that fight. And I think that was a good learning experience for Hope, because normally he plays a safe game by taking opponents to the ground and smashing them from the top position or grinding them out and winning fights on the scorecards. So maybe he needs to be a little bit more conservative with his gas tank next time around so he can actually go out there and be successful should opponents not go away so easily. He has some nasty elbows from that top position, has some good ground and pound as well, and his striking is slowly starting to come together so that he can eventually change levels, get opponents to the ground, and do his best work from that top position. I really like Hope here. I think this is a spot where he can avoid the early finishing danger that Jeremy Henry presents, and then eventually find a finish of his own within the second or third round as Henry starts to give up those full mount positions that he often does. All right. Co-main event now, where we got Christian Natividad coming in at minus 450 going up against Jose Sandoval, who comes in at plus 350. Now, Natividad, I'm very happy, is starting to be a little bit more active at this stage of his career. He went 4-0, then took 2 years off, I believe from an injury, and now he returned in November, put on a very dominant performance and ended up getting his hand raised there, and now he's looking to add another win to his record. His last win before his layoff was against Israel Galvin, who's really making a name for himself on the regional scene, specifically for CFFC, where I believe he won the title there. Galvin is 8-1 in his last 9 fights, with that one loss coming to Natividad, and I think that just goes to show how good Natividad actually is. He's very well rounded. He has great fight IQ. He's very methodical in the striking realm, where he's able to put together solid combinations and land with some solid sting. I know he doesn't have a lot of finishes on his record, but I think his knockout power is kind of understated because of that. But he also has a very solid smothering top game should he look to take opponents to the ground and grind them out from there. And I think he's going to try to look to just put the whole mixed martial arts game here together against a very crafty and unorthodox Jose Sandoval. Now, Sandoval pulled off a pretty big upset last time around as he made a splash on the LFA scene in March, as he was able to submit Apuni Pagoa after getting rocked very badly. Pagoa was able to hurt Sandoval, but followed him to the ground, where Sandoval, I believe now a BJJ brown belt, was able to create a scramble, hold on until he got his wits back, and then eventually pulled off, I believe it was a heel hook in the dying seconds of that first round to get the tap from Pagoa. Sandoval is very durable. In numerous fights of his, even in ones that he ended up winning, like the Pagoa fight, he's been hurt and dropped by pretty much all of his opponents that have good enough resistance, and that's been his issue. But he manages to battle back into those fights, get fights into the grappling realm, and then get to a submission game where he often finds himself victorious. But there's a reason Natividad finds himself as a minus 450 favorite in this fight. He's just better overall. And I think he's defensively responsible enough to deal with the unorthodox game of Sandoval, and I think he'll butcher him on the feet. And even if he looks to take him to the ground, I think he can stay safe enough from that top position to avoid the aggressive BJJ game of Sandoval and punish him on the feet. I don't know if he finishes him, considering the durability we've seen from Sandoval, but I think it's just a matter of time before Natividad ends up getting his hand raised here and coming through as the big favorite. All right. That brings us to the main event now between hometown kid Lance Lawrence, who comes in at plus 150, and Javier Reyes, who comes in at minus 180, also on short notice. Now, Lawrence, I initially came across back at LFA 180 when he came in on short notice in the main event against Landry Ward and came in as a pretty decent underdog, especially considering all the hype that was on Landry Ward going into that fight. And Lawrence beat him from pillar to post for 15 minutes and looked damn good doing so. He's very crisp with his striking approach, entering the pocket, landing his straight shots down the pipe, pivoting out of those spots, and getting back to range. But he also had a very threatening guillotine game, which he actually showed off in his last win, where he was able to pull off a submission victory, I believe, over Jacob Bond. I believe the guy's name was up in New York. I believe I was even present for that fight or live for that fight as well. But we've seen spots where Lawrence has been stuck up against the cage or getting his back taken, and he showcased good defense, but he ends up giving up rounds by giving up some control. And I think that's where he could end up struggling here against Javier Reyes. Now, Reyes did start his LFA career with a dub last year, but now is 0-2 over his last 2 appearances. One of those coming to a by knockout to eventual champion Lorraine Douglas. And then last time around, he headlined against Chris Makate just a month ago. And Makate, really had to dig deep to get the win there, as Reyes had some solid success of his own, but it ended up being Makate that ended up winning that decision. Now, Reyes has gone from being a smothering grappler to being a guy that relied more so on his striking, and it seemed like in the Makate fight, he was trying to go back to his grappling. And I think that's the way for him to go, especially in this matchup. He wasn't able to get the win over Makate because on paper, Makate is probably the better wrestler and better grappler, but here against Lawrence, maybe Lawrence has the BJJ advantage ever so slightly, but in terms of wrestling and physicality, I think that's where Reyes really has the advantage, and I think he can keep this fight in a spot where he can dictate the pace, crowd Lawrence up against the cage, get him into the clinch, wear him down there. Lawrence might have some success if he's able to stay at range and land his faster shots down the pipe, but I think for the most part, he's going to deal with a very physical Reyes who's going to be putting him up against the cage, dragging him to the ground, maybe even getting the back of Lawrence and trying to grind him out there as well. So I think Reyes is going to be spoiling the hometown return for Lance Lawrence here, and I think we see Reyes grind this fight out. Might be kind of boring if I'm being honest, but Reyes needs to get back onto the winning track, especially with his 0-2 run with LFA over his last 2 fights. So give me Reyes, and Reyes by decision. All right, there you guys go. Full card breakdown for LFA 210. Again, this goes down Friday night. So you got plenty of time to hop on the Lock of the Night Patreon page and see which plays that I pull the trigger on. Otherwise, take the information that I've given you here and try to make some plays of your own if you must. Otherwise, yeah, that is what it is. We'll be back again, obviously, on Sunday for the next UFC breakdown. But reminder, there is also OKTAGON and KSW going down Saturday morning, playing as an appetizer to the UFC Atlanta card Saturday night. And I'll only have those breakdowns in written form on the MMA LLT and Patreon page. Check the link in the description below for that. Otherwise, good luck on all your action this weekend, folks. And I'll see you guys again on tomorrow, actually. I'm dropping this on Thursday. So tomorrow I'll be dropping the prop drop for you guys for UFC Atlanta. I'll see you guys then. Peace.